Thanks everyone. Thanks Sanjeev for actually bringing this panel together. Interesting mix of enabler versus the actual guys who will deliver healthcare services, and now in the new world with AI, and the most important piece, how do you protect your data? How do you govern it, right? So I'll give a quick introduction to what I do, and then I'll have each one of you talk about what your own roles are. So my name is Gaurav Vasu. I run a firm called Unearth Insight. We're in the business of unearthing, as the name suggests, key insights on the adopters side, which is the likes of hospitals, healthcare, pharma, automotive. And on the technology side, we work with larger technology products, startups, and service providers, private equities now, to help them understand what's the adoption looking like on your side of the world, so that they build technologies and solutions which are more actionable and useful, right? So that's what I do. Maybe Vivek, why don't you talk about what your role is?
Thanks, Gaurav. So I'm Vivek. I'm the Chief of Data Intelligence and AI at Narayana Health. Been around with NH for about 15 years now. And over the last 10 years, we've been building out Medha AI, which is our home-built data intelligence and AI platform that covers everything from business intelligence to clinical intelligence, clinical AI as well.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nandkishore, and I'm a CIO for Manipal Hospitals. Almost 3 decades in the industry, 31 years to be more precise. With Manipal, roughly about 18 years. And I'm driving the entire group technology strategy for Manipal Group.
Thanks, NK.
Hi, I'm Sreeshankar. I'm with Siemens Healthineers. I take care of cybersecurity, all branches.
I'm Sudeep. I work for Aster DM Healthcare, work as the CIO and CISO.
Thanks. So I think maybe I'll start with the first question, right? Which is, in the last 3-4 years, we've seen, a huge amount of uptake on enterprise AI. And with that happening, and with, each of your organizations either trying to build in-house versus, through partners, through ecosystem, what's one I would like to actually share for you guys to share with you, the audience, in terms of what's been, 2 or 3 of the interesting use cases that you're working on across the entire patient life cycle, if you can touch upon a couple of them. And second piece is, are you actually trying to do this given the data protection and, Data Protection Act around, and also the patient worry of, my own worry, for example, if I'm a patient, right, is how do you actually bring in disintegrated data parameters from multiple sources? So offline, we were talking about how, our phones are listening in, our social media platforms are listening in, and today a lot of technology partners have started to access that data, which is how do you protect the disparate data which comes to you? And I think a couple of you guys are doing it in-house, right? Which is, what's the advantages and learnings been when you try to build this in-house versus partners plus in-house? That's a good perspective for people here, right? So maybe we'll start with you, Vivek, which is, and you have an interesting perspective of in-house journey for the last decade, right? So maybe if you can talk about what are the use cases, what's been the, what's your take on how do you govern data? How do you look at, data protection? And also, what's your take on a lot of this external data coming in into the platforms, which I know you don't use a lot of partners, but you actually spend time with the ecosystem, right? So maybe you can throw some light on that.
Sure. See, the way we look at data intelligence and AI and the data journey, you need to have a strong foundational intelligence for you to be able to scalably implement AI. That is what we have learned from our own journey. If your data foundation is not well engineered, then you will still be able to do AI, but soon your AI journey will plateau. It will happen in silos. It will be opportunistic, where there is one cool project or one cool startup that has come up with an idea, and you'll be implementing that. We break it down into 3 phases, our data progression itself, in terms of foundational intelligence, actionable intelligence, and agentic intelligence. When we say foundational intelligence, all of your data from every system has to be integrated into a single area and has to be interoperable, standardized. The semantic layer has to be unified. You need to have monitoring visibility around every process area in the business. That is what we call as foundational intelligence. Actionable intelligence is where you're able to put your foundation to action, where you go beyond monitoring. You're able to, say, act on exceptions, act on opportunities, embed it into core workflows where there are people responsible for certain things. And the third part is agentic intelligence, where you're able to identify which of these can be autonomously done by agents that are there. The reason for us to build this foundational intelligence, one of the reasons is the data privacy and security that we spoke about. If your data is always in disparate systems, a request that comes that says, forget me from a patient, how are you even going to execute it? You have no architecture, you have no automation, you have no easy way of guaranteeing to the customer that you're able to execute that. First thing is, if you're able to bring all of it, catalog all of it, preserve the lineage, which is essentially the base for privacy and security by design, which is both an architecture standpoint and a technology standpoint. So that is our short outlook on this.
Got it. Thanks, Vivek. NK, from your perspective, right, your entire 18 years with the organization, and I'm sure last 3 years you would have seen a lot of changes, a lot of data use cases and AI use cases getting integrated. So what's been, couple of use cases maybe that you want to talk about? And I think Vivek talked about a very important aspect. We all, think that the first thing we were taught when we started research was junk in, junk out, right? If you don't know how to actually search on the internet, you'll start getting junk. And now today also in the world of LLMs, if you don't know the right prompts, right way to ask a question, you'll end up getting junk, right? So I'm sure that was also a fundamental shift like what Vivek talked about, which you put in place, which is you have your base readiness assessments done on these use cases. But what are those, 2 or 3, given that you have long-standing relationship, and I'm sure you've also, you're well known in the ecosystem also, right? So what are those 2 or 3 use cases, and how did you look at readiness for adoption?
Sure. So thanks for this question. I think I'll answer this question in 2 parts, and perhaps I will begin with two important parameters what he expressed. The security by design. I think we have to go back to that particular point. If whatever we are doing AI, okay. So the very foundation of any AI solution for Manipal as a strategy is actually the security. Is the data secure? Is the solution secure? And now the recent DPDP compliance, that is also a sort of filter for us to continue further discussions, further evaluation of any AI solution. If it fails there, we perhaps don't take it up further. Because we all know that the DPDP compliance is a very, very important thing for all of us. And the kind of penalties those are there in that regulation or that act are really, really very exorbitant, right? So we do not want to take any risk, any chance on the security part of it. And we have to reject a lot of these kind of solutions, good solutions, because they were not secured enough, okay? So that's the first filter that we have. Secondly, coming to the areas, the buckets of deployment, those deployments, and if I pick up a couple of use cases, what we have already done, or some of them are actually in pipeline, is obviously one is the diagnostics part of it, and we have started that with the radiology reporting. Okay, so that is where we have some AI deployment wherein the preliminary reporting is done by the AI, followed by the person who's sitting there, the radiologist, he or she is actually doing that subsequently. The second area we tried that in the IP, wherein we have that nursing handover, which was a complete manual process. So we have some AI deployment in that nursing handover where they are able to summarize the whole thing using a solution, the AI-enabled or AI-backed solution, so that around 30 minutes of turnaround time becomes roughly about 5 minutes. So it's a major nursing time saving on that, and a lot of accuracy of the information with respect to the patient status and the statistics. So that is one deployment in the IP nursing handover side. We also have AI implementation in our initiative, which is called as e-pharmacy, which is mainly for Manipal patients only. It's not a retail pharmacy kind of thing. So prescription to ordering, and also understanding the substitutes and all that, stocks availability and stuff. So there is the AI deployment which takes care of this prescription. It picks up, it studies that, and tries to convert that to the pharmacy order. And then it goes to the HIS, and the entire logistics part is taken care of through AI. Then there is one more area of deployment of AI in Manipal is the ICU area, where we are using a lot of sensors to kind of have the basic monitoring of patients, right? So we can actually bring the cost down by not admitting the patient in ICU if there is no need to admit the patient in ICU, and handle that through AI-enabled solution where 1 or 2 nurses can monitor more than 10, 12 patients. So there we have used sensors and the AI piece and the solution from one of the OEM to deliver that outcome, which is successfully working for us. So these are some of the deployment, and we are continuously evaluating newer solutions of the AI. But as I said, the first filtration for us is the DPDP and the IT security and data protection, comfort for all of us.
Thanks, NK. So I think going from AI first or secure first, right, Sri, your perspective, or given your role that you play, how do you, I'm sure you have a lot of examples that you can talk about, but why don't you talk about use cases and what are the guardrails from cybersecurity and data security perspective, because there'll be a lot of internal plus external. Maybe if you can throw some light on that.
Yeah. So there are basically three things that you see when you, as an equipment manufacturer, as a service provider, digital service provider for healthcare. The first thing is, for diagnostics. NK already spoke about it. Then there is monitoring. He touched upon it. And the third thing is assisted intervention. Your surgeries that use, today there is a robotic surgery everywhere almost. We see that. And many of that employ AI. Now, these are the main three areas. If you look at all these services from the lens of privacy, you are left with a lot of challenges. Why is that? You got to feed in the right parameters for your monitoring or for your diagnostics, and you should be able to read it appropriately. So as an equipment manufacturer, you are supposed to provide that. So you got to have accurate measurements, accurate storage within the system, accurate transfers. You got to have right encryptions. You can't take it light. Okay, well, that is one thing. Assisted intervention is a totally different game. So I think you would have seen in the media, it came out, a story where a lady from US, all the doctors had given up. She came down here. She was, there was a very complex surgery that they did in Bangalore or Hyderabad. I think it was Bangalore. So that was a grand success. And why was it a grand success? Because they made a digital twin. They ran many, preemptive attempts on the twin before they did actually the real surgery. So that kind of an environment, if you have to build, there is data required. Now, where do you get this data from? Do you have the necessary consent from the patient? How do you interchange? Anonymization is almost impossible in the area of, in the era of AI. So these are some of the challenges that we come across as equipment manufacturers.
Maybe Sri, just another additional point, since we have a lot of startups in the room who are actually going to try and do exactly what you do today and then partner with some of the hospital and healthcare partners, right? Is what are those one or two or couple of guardrails that you should keep in mind? Especially you talked about consent management and anonymization of data. I was actually surprised. One of the hospital uses one of large providers' data, and they said one of the parameters in the data is a lot of your social footprint data, which you have given consent, you're not aware of, but today that's getting used in the healthcare space. So why don't you touch upon, what are those 2 or 3 guardrails, from your perspective, which you would feel it's important for startups to know in the room?
So this is inherent, consent, which is a, in the olden days we used to have shadow IT, and then the shadow cloud area. Now it is shadow AI, consent management. So that's a very big challenge. So for those entrepreneurs and for those who are creating equipment, systems, and add-ons to the equipment manufacturers, they need to be extremely cautious about, or they must put the right kind of filters for consent. And if you do not do that, DPDP will at some point catch up with that, because they're going to, DPDP has allowed us to get to the point that's causing conflict. right? There will be audits, it may not happen today, tomorrow, or maybe in the next 1.5 years, but it is going to come around, right? So putting the right kind of filters, qualifying it before you integrate it with the larger systems, I think that is the most important guardrail one has to face. And the second thing is, it can be used anywhere. Don't just get stuck onto DPDPA. Look at what the FDA requirements are, because I think many of the countries across the globe use FDA as a guideline. So look at that as well. So those are the two things I would say at the top of the list.
Thanks, Sri. Sudeep, coming to you, right, from a adopter perspective, right? One is if you could touch upon a couple of use cases, and then from a data privacy protection perspective, how do you look at some of those use cases in the AI first world? And I'm sure you're also leveraging a lot of partners, right? So how do you also put those guardrails like what Sri talked about, which are guardrails that you keep in mind, and at the same time some of your larger partners and startups have to keep in mind?
What to say? Everybody knows it all, but I'll share my experience. Yeah. And within that experience or that example, there were learnings for us which might be useful. We started our AI journey almost along with Nasscom 3 years ago. And we had our learnings when just AI was getting adopted. We feel those days explainability were important terms, and they are still. It's not that they are not. We spoke about FDA, and that is something which helped us learn the ropes of the game very early on. So when we did the first example, we were doing a model which was an SLM model for diagnosing cancer in buccal cavity. And we were successful in 3 towns of Maharashtra, and we failed in Assam. I believe you will understand, because now it sounds a lot of commonsensical why we failed. Any guesses why we failed? Some parameters were not there. Yeah, the data was not normalized for Assam, because ethnicities are different, food habits are different, and our model failed by from a 92% accuracy, it came down to 65% accuracy. The sponsors lost faith in the product. But somehow we sailed through. That is when we came across FDA and the norms, and we followed it to the T to realize that there are 5 parameters which we should have. 5 parameters with about several features of 10 to 12 features each, which we had to build it in. And thankfully, we were able to get it in our data because we were following some ICMR guidelines, and it helped. So those were the days of pure play AI. But now, the governance of AI has come to, as he's saying, shadow IT or shadow AI, to something like agents being deployed. And we are a PE-funded organization. And do you know what 2 of the largest Ps have done? Any idea what they have done? You must have come across the news. The moment I say yes, you will say yeah. Any idea of what the PE firms have done? 2 of the largest PE firms. 15 seconds for an answer. They have created a company to distribute AI products. Blackstone and KKR are the largest PE funds in the globe. They have tied up with OpenAI and Anthropic for distributing agents, platforms for creating agents. So hence, the second aspect is how do I govern those agents? We have put up a guardrails, because agents are a very different beast. I first tasted agents when they had logged us out from doing treatments which were driven from the cloud and was fueled by AI. And we were logged out for about 5-6 hours because an autonomous agent told a human agent that you locked down because there is an attack which is coming from India. And it was not there. We had to go and do incident management. I represent cybersecurity also, so we had to spend about 5-6 hours to zero down that the attack did not originate from us. And there was a problem with one of the IDs in their system. And they immediately took course correction. No names here. So those have been our experiences. So agents have to be subjected to the same level of governance and more then humans. You know, when we do transactions, we make sure audit trails are there. We make sure who passed the transaction, who authorized the transactions. Imagine that for agents. How do you do identity management for agents? And these agents are not just autonomous. They are insidious. They will say, one agent will say another agent, can you do this transaction for me? And then there are prompts which are not caught in firewalls. It is a humongous task. We are in the formative stages. We are collaborating with one of the finest in the world. I can't take names again. But my governance has gone into agentic AI from just AI. AI, I feel, was still simpler because we were operating with our own models. We did not go for any publicly sourced models. It is with our own SMEs and with some of our academic institutions who were very helpful, and also industry associations like Nasscom, that was still controllable. Agents need a very different kind of thought process as far as I am concerned.
No, I think that's really, so I think that's really helpful. I think maybe from your perspective, Vivek, in terms of governance.
The word that we are taking all the they were so colorful.
Thanks, no.
We are going to take this mind.
No, I think very important point, Sudeep, that you mentioned. In fact, I just did a similar sort of a panel discussion on finance, and since you talked about autonomous finance, autonomous agents, one very interesting use case that's running is today, we decide what we buy on a matter of like 2 clicks and you buy some product, you give authentication, Paytm and all. There are agents which are getting built to actually run transactions end to end, right? Autonomous finance is the future very soon. And with CBDC, we're not far that, what we want to buy, we just identify and let the agent decide, negotiate on platforms and figure out for us, right? In that sort of a dangerous world, and if you, play that back from a healthcare perspective, Vivek, from your perspective, how do you look at governance, right? So one, funny correlation that one of the technologists had in the room was your autonomous agents will, very soon become like your mother-in-laws, right? If you don't put the right amount of guardrails, there's a technology evangelist, right? He said, you never know what will come out of it. It's exactly the story that you said, its mouth. And that could be a 5-day or a 5-month damage control that you'll have to do. Right? So in that sort of a context, right? That's just a pun intended in terms of how dangerous it could be, right? So from your perspective, right, the size of the data that you handle and the fact that, Vivek, you want to do this largely in-house, along with, I'm sure there's a lot of learnings in the last decade. How do you look at governance and all of these autonomous agents that you must also be building, especially from a patient care perspective and assisted patient examples, right? And most importantly, with what NK said, surgeries and ICU management, right? If AI is going to get in there, how will you look at governance from that perspective?
So there is never going to be one single solution that is there. If your governance is too overfitted or too much of governance, then you're going to stifle innovation in the organization. There is a 4-point strategy that we use around governance. One is starting with policies. You first of all have policies around AI utilization. And these has to cover everything from acceptable use of AI to, as Sudeep was saying, incident handling around AI. And you need to have tiered SOPs for AI. Things that are simple in nature, administrative in nature, should have much less guardrails. Things that make irreversible decisions, especially with human lives in clinical, should have very strong oversight, should have very strong human-in-the-loop component. So there need to be tiered SOPs itself to begin with. Second is technical controls that you have. As an organization, are people putting in patient data onto openly available LLMs without knowing the consequences? Or not just patient data, even organizations' own IP, or sensitive data onto those things. So what is the technological guardrails that you have and technical guardrails that you have around your agents itself in terms of how the agent is performing? Is the agent up or not? How many tokens is your agent guzzling? Is it actually worth it from a cost standpoint? All of that. Third part is the human governance aspect of it. Do you have an AI governance council in your organization? For every AI agent that is running, do you have the accountability matrix very clear? If the agent gives incorrect responses, is the AI team responsible, is the IT team responsible, or is the doctor responsible for the treatment of the patient? Yes. So you need to have a proper governance structure itself in your organization. Last one is, are your people trained to be able to use AI? So are you upskilling people based on their role in a structured manner in your organization? Those are the 4 aspects that we look at.
Thanks. NK, from your perspective, right?
I'll just, a couple of thoughts around this particular question is that this is still an evolving domain, I would say. There's no structured guidelines for all of us. While in Manipal, we are doing the DPDP implementation. I mean, it's one of the big 4 is doing that for us. But some of these AI-related areas, as we look at those specific cases, we'll have to evolve with the guardrails and the guidelines and the controls and stuff, right? While DPDP has a very standard implementation blueprint and all that, this would be an evolving thing for the next couple of years, and accordingly we'll have to catch up with the security-related aspects and the guardrails. That is how I would, put my answer. But having said that, having a structured approach and having a baseline, controls for the AI and even the non-AI related deployment is what I would say the primary requirement for any organization.
Thanks. And then I'm sure, like what Vivek said, given that your use cases are diverse across, right? And you also talked about ICU, which is the most high-end use case. So I'm sure the governance guardrails, like Vivek said, is going to be different by the type of data that you handle and also by the type of use cases, especially for ICU. We would love to hear a little more on that.
So what we have done is basically, the first thing is that if there is, a critical solution and if possible to deploy that in my private cloud, Manipal has a private cloud. So most of those things are actually taken care of because the controls are with us, right? Then comes to the deployment areas which are, in public cloud kind of environment. So I would say that we are still at the stage where we are exploring, we are redefining controls and all that. So we are at that stage currently. Because today there is no clear document which tells me, okay, do the following 5 things, right? And whatever is a known information, that is anyways taken care of in terms of guardrails and controls.
Thanks. Sri, from your perspective?
I think I'll just state one layer which is common for everything in security, that governance is a non-negotiable entity that needs to exist throughout, not for a particular phase, not for a particular product. Even like what NK said, okay, it's happening since it is evolving, and it will keep evolving for the next few years. There has to be a governance function that is alive and keep looking at the governance activities and not just say, I have defined it, let's go home now. No, you cannot do that.
So it's not just a document, but you also have a set of leaders and teams that look at it. How about startups, Sri, right? So a lot of medical device and healthcare startups here do come in for a specific bolt-on solution that they would want to sell to a Aster or a Manipal, right? So from that perspective, one is obviously the documented governance, but how do they put the piece of human in loop, right? So how do they bring that? Do they bring that in partnership with a hospital or a healthcare, or do they have a ethical AI?
It may not be technically possible for them to start interacting with so many entities, like the equipment manufacturers, resellers, repair and return folks, consultants, hospitals. Where will they go? Because everywhere the data is important. So I would say go to Shantanu. Probably Shantanu will be the right point, who will say, okay,
let me
he's
figure
supposed
out
to have a central body of knowledge. I would strongly urge that kind of a service to be given to startups so that they make a meaningful delivery. Otherwise, they have made some deliverable which is good for 6 months back.
No, Sri, that's a very valid point. And having worked with the ecosystem and Nasscom CoE, right, I think that's a great job that they do, which is make sure that the basic check boxes in terms of enterprise readiness and governance are there, right? Sudeep, coming back to you, right now, what about your learnings? You talked about governance, but what about your learnings of, is there a differentiated way organizations will look at, again, governance? When you partner with a third party, it could be LLMs, cloud, and plus internal, are there subtle differences that you look at, or startups?
See, when it comes to clinical, we will like to go with certified sources. if we have to do any bespoke development, we would like to get the LLM and do it ourselves with a partner. We are a very lean team actually. We do not have a very elaborate tech team, but explainability in such matters is very important. So we, by and large, for developing pure play AI, we have very strong guardrails. But for agentic AI, we are developing them. At the moment, we are in the evolution process. There are 2 projects which have come up. And like Vivek said, nothing much to add. We are almost on the same lines. He's more structured. We have not focused on the education part, Vivek, yet. So I took a note of that when you said it. We would like to be as structured as what he has suggested.
Thanks, Sudeep. I think maybe I'll open it up to people in the room in case you have any specific questions for any of them. Naman, you have a question?
Don't prompt a question. We are more knowledgeable.
No questions? Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Vivek,
you.
NK, Sri, Sudeep. Thank you so much for your time.
Sudhanshu sir to felicitate our leaders. Let's give them a round of applause, everyone. Come on, we have one more very interesting session to go.